Okay. I'll try to pick up the voice a little bit. My name's Will, by the way, Will Lindsay. I'll tell you a little bit about this ghost machine business and why I'm involved with it. This is related to a talk that happened at Hope Number 9. Hope Number 9, the talk was called Building Radios to Talk to the Dead. And about a year before Hope Number 9, I got involved in this. This is still fairly new to me, 3 or 4 years now. That talk was specifically about analog radio, and I found a whole culture of people online, a large international group of people who were changing, bending, breaking, hacking radios in order to communicate with the dead. I'd never heard anything like that in my life. I thought it was pretty interesting. Shortly thereafter, I realized that this thing they were doing, it's called EVP, electronic voice phenomena. And the idea is that somehow spirits or ghosts are controlling the electrons or the electromagnetic energy around us and making voices come out. So you can actually talk to the deceased or at least listen to the deceased. I found out during that time, I thought this is amazing, but it turned out it's just a small sliver of a larger idea. That idea, or EVP, I'm sorry, electronic voice phenomena, is actually a subsection of something that many, many more people practice throughout the world called instrumental transcommunication. I'm going to refer to that as ITC throughout the talk, instrumental transcommunication. It is what it sounds like, and it's a pretty vague term to cover a lot of ideas. The basic idea is some sort of electronic device or analog or digital device that's being used to facilitate this conversation past the grave. There's something that's when this is really a two-way conversation. This is people that want to have a conversation. This isn't a broadcast from beyond. It's a two-way thing. Something that is commonly believed, to the best of my understanding, is that folks who have passed occupy roughly the same space we're in, but maybe in a different plane, so they can already hear us. I don't know how, but they already hear and understand us, right? And this is commonly believed throughout. However, we aren't smart enough, or we don't have the technology yet to understand communication in the opposite direction. So a lot of these devices that I'm going to show you today are going to seem like they're one-way communication, but the idea is usually the people using them are talking to the air, talking to space in hopes that there's a continuous conversation happening. Let me talk about me for a second and how I got involved in this. I'm a teacher by trade. I'm an artist. I do something called research art. So I based my art practice, performance, gallery work off of research of real things I found in history or real social groups, things like that. All of my work, for as long as I've been doing this in all different fields, is about our relationship with technology. Specifically, I'm interested in how does technology change us as a society? How does it change our culture? How do we change the technology? I'm especially interested in groups that subvert technology, right? So a technology comes along and somebody designs it and it has an intended purpose, and then you have a bunch of people, probably half the people in this room, who want to change it and do something completely different with it. That's really fascinating to me. I've done work on the past with 8-bit music, kind of like the concerts that are going to happen tonight and tomorrow night. People who are hacking video games to make music, unintended purpose, that's fabulous. What else? Hackers, obviously, bending radios and computers and things like that to talk to the dead. What I like to do is I educate myself about these systems. I do it fairly agnostically. I don't necessarily agree or disagree with what's going on. I just kind of take it all in. I then like to take these tools and open them up, create some open source packages so that other artists, experimenters, hackers can then use these tools, right? And then I also use them for my own exhibition and performances. I'll show you a little bit of that if we have time at the end. First, let me talk about this word apophenia. So the name of this talk, and this is also what I've named the body of work that I'm working on right now. Some people in Signal and crypto may know this word already. Apophenia is the idea that people have the ability to take complete randomness and organize it and get meaning from it. So we extract meaning from completely random data sets. It's kind of an amazing thing. It's just something I think our brain has to do to cope, right? And for an example of that, everybody's probably seen this picture before. This is the face on Mars. And we all know consciously there's probably not a giant head glued to the side of Mars. But when we see those specific shapes, we want to make meaning of it. And so we believe it's a face. Faces are probably one of the most dominant things that come through in this apophenia. It's one of the things we are most likely to recognize, or one of the ways that we most want to make sense of what's around us. Clouds, I don't know how that looks on the projector. It could be either a bunny or a duck or a cloud, depending on your position, I guess. I'm barely sure what this is. This is actually folks that work on ITC came up with this. This is smoke reflected through a lantern onto water in a metal dish, or a horse, I guess, or a dog, or a strange picture. I don't know. Apophenia. So let me talk about the history of this a little bit. In my last talk, I talked specifically about the history of the radio side of things, and I want to talk more about the networking tools that we've used and how that they got used for ghost communications, and a little bit about computers and then what's happening in contemporary time right now. I'm going to jump back to, let's see in my notes here, 1921. I'm just going to pull a couple examples out of history and just kind of tell you the stories of what happened with these. This gentleman named F.R. Melton, he was a radio operator in World War I. He lived in Nottingham, England. He published this design in a magazine called Light Magazine. I've not seen the whole issue. I've just seen scans of this design. He referred to this as a psychic telephone. And what Melton realized with his radio, and radio operators, I know there's some amateurs in the crowd out here probably already recognize this. When you're not transmitting or receiving, you want to detach that giant antenna that's going out of your house or the building you're working in case there's lightning or static or something like that. Get it off the radio. And he realized that when he detached his antenna, he could still receive signals. Now, there's a lot of different theories on how that could possibly happen. In New York City, I think it's overload from the AM stations, right? But out in the middle of nowhere, it may be something completely different. Melton, based on where he was and what he knew about radio, theorized that the broadcast must be coming from in the room he was in, right? And the only explanation that he could decide from that point is that perhaps somebody occupying another plane in the same space, or the dead from beyond the grave, right? So he started taking that radio and tweaking it and tweaking the design of it to figure out what worked best to get this two-way communication going. And this is the design that he finally ended up with and published. Kind of an interesting one. Again, the output communication is yelling in the room, right? So there doesn't necessarily need to be a transmission. This is mostly about receiving in this device. D is the headphones, right? F is the jack to plug in the headphones, and E is a power source. I guess they used some dry cell batteries back then. A, he lists as a transmitter, and I believe this is an analog receiver, kind of like a microphone or something you would see on an old Victrola. That could vibrate with physical vibrations, not necessarily a radio transmitter. B is a balloon. I thought that was kind of an interesting part of the design. And then there's a little spring holding the whole works together. So something to do with the balloon expanding and contracting. And he believed that the spirits could manipulate that and then cause some kind of voices or sound to come through. I don't really know what happened to his research or why he quit or why we don't all have one of these in our house right now. Hard to say with some of these that I'll be talking about. This guy, let's see, I'm going to jump forward in history a little bit to 1940. This picture was taken much later. This is Gilbert Wright. He was a researcher for GE. Maybe somebody in the room might recognize his name. Apparently in 1943 he invented or patented silly putty, also working for GE. Silicon putty. So this is the guy responsible for that. I'm getting this secondhand through information in a very reliable source, a magazine called Fate magazine. This is an article that he was involved with in 1963. This was published, but it's about things that he did in the 40s. Apparently, he attended a seance, not too uncommon in that World War II era. Seances at the time, instead of having devices or radios or things to talk to the dead, would have a person who would channel that energy. Very questionable, which is why I think a lot of people started chasing these devices. We put our trust in technology, right? People you can't trust, but a computer or a radio or a piece of hardware, that's something we can trust in life. I don't know about that, but they believed it. Anyway, he was at a seance in, I believe this was 1940 when this happened. And the person running the seance was communicating the thoughts of who they believed to be Thomas Edison, right? And it took me quite a while to track down this story. Edison's ghost said there were some designs missing from his notes. And this particular design that you see on the screen, I'll explain it in a second, was lost in a letter that went to some folks working with him. The actual letter was never recovered, but somebody who said they saw the letter then traced this diagram from the letter and redrew it later. So this is about four hands whisper down the lane, or I guess the game of telephone, they say. The meaning may have changed. My understanding of this, M down at the bottom is some sort of microphone, and then on top of this box that the microphone is in is a metal cylinder. The metal cylinder is filled with a chemical. I don't know much about chemistry, but he lists here as potassium permanganate. Beats me. A is an antenna. I'm not sure the relationship between the antenna and the microphone. And when Gilbert Wright and his associate Harry Gardner got this diagram finally, I don't think they understood it either. In fact, he decided to take this design, ignore Thomas Edison, and create his own or their own design. I don't have a picture of their design, but I do have this very vivid description I'll read, which is kind of interesting. Gardner goes on to explain, he had built a sound box 14 inches by 7 inches high. It's lined with a soundproof material. It has a small hole in one side, and it contained a microphone which connected to a loudspeaker. And that loudspeaker could either be in the room or it could, in fact, be in another room, so some kind of third party could kind of monitor what was going on without the medium necessarily understanding the entirety of it. A medium did have to be present for this, and here's why. He says the idea is that, here's the theory, the sound box could be placed close to a medium, and ectoplasm projected from the solar plexus of the medium would go through the little hole in the box and create a diaphragm, and then the spirits could move that diaphragm, and that would create the voice the microphone would then pick up. Several people watched this happen. Apparently voices came out of it. If you watched my talk in Hope number 9, it turns out some of these people were ventriloquists. I'm not saying that's what happened in this case. But it's questionable, right? And apparently Wright decided to retire before he finished any research on it. So that kind of went nowhere. Oh, a seance. I don't know why I didn't show that picture. This is Coronet Magazine. This is a magazine from 1955. There's a whole series of ideas dealing with telephone. And probably everybody's heard a story about ghosts and telephones. I'll tell one of them. I think it's a fairly interesting one. This particular story was published by Alfred Hitchcock, of course a reliable source, right? Alfred Hitchcock writing this story, but I had actually seen a second version of the story that Hitchcock based this writing on, and so there is some comparison that maybe somewhere back in history where this story began, some people actually told this story as a real thing that happened or real events. This story is about, Arne Gandy, young man in the 1930s, and he goes off to work for a shipping company. The shipping company has him on a boat that goes all over the world. And in 1933, they port in San Francisco. He goes running off the boat to have fun in San Francisco, and the boat leaves without him, right? He writes a letter to his family. The family receives the letter. In January 5th, 1934, they received this letter from their son saying, hey, I've been stranded in San Francisco. I don't have my possessions. I have a little bit of money that I was carrying. I don't have any of my personal effects. I'm not really sure what I'm going to do. And they get this letter. 3 a.m., January 10th, on an unlisted phone number to the parents' house, the mother receives a call from a stranger, an unrecognized voice. And so the story goes, the ghost, there I gave it away already. The voice says, will you forgive your son if you promise that he can come home? And he's in a hospital in San Francisco, and there were several other voices that come into the call. And we'll send him home, right? Another voice then interrupts and kind of fades in, and the voice says, here I lie, propped up on pillows, I can't move. And then the line goes dead, right? It turns out that sometime later, the police found his body in San Francisco, and he had drowned in the water there. And an autopsy determined that he had actually died 48 hours before the phone call was made, right? So again, there's a lot of stories like this out there, and some are more questionable than others. I think this is probably one of the odder and maybe more historically embellished stories, which makes it kind of interesting. So many of these stories have happened just specifically about telephone, right, and the analog computer network that was telephone all the way up through the 1980s and 90s. That different researchers have approached this in different ways. They've approached this particular story and tried to analyze it. They've also taken instances where this is happening to other people and try to create some kind of scientific box around it to prove or disprove what is going on here. In this particular case, most people thought because it was an unlisted number, it was pretty unlikely that it would be a prank, right? Though I think anybody who would know that the son was away maybe would know the phone number, so that's questionable. Some people, there was some belief with some of these calls that somebody could make the call from in the house, right? But anybody who remembers analog lines, if you pick it up, you can't really make the phone ring on the other end. Some of you guys probably could, right? But maybe her husband or somebody messing with her couldn't. And you would hear the dial tone, right? And there was no dial tone in this call, it was just voice. Another theory that gets tossed around pretty often is that maybe the person who received the call is psychic, and they're actually channeling their own energies through the phone as an object, right? I don't know if that can be proved or disproved. The main thing that people say goes against that idea is that a lot of these calls are completely random or unprovoked, right? She had no reason to believe at that particular instance that something had happened to her son, other than receiving this letter days and days beforehand. Move forward a little bit. I'm going to talk about a guy named Julius Weinberger in the 1960s. I could not find a picture of him. He was an engineer for RCA. I'm picking on some of the more intelligent people in these stories to talk about what they did for obvious reasons. I couldn't find his picture, so I found one of the patents that his name is on. So this is an RCA patent for some kind of speaker. Most of his patents were listening devices, speakers, speaker arrays, recorders, things like that, which is kind of interesting. Julius Weinberger was at the same time in his shop at home in the evenings working on this Edison idea, some way to communicate with the dead, some way to make a two-way conversation happen. And he realized while he would work late at night in a shop that sometimes the back of his neck would tingle and you get that kind of sketchy feeling, and everyone's probably felt that now and again. He didn't believe that he was causing that nervous response, that his body didn't give him the chill. He believed that ghosts were actually touching him or causing that to happen. And he believed it so much that he thought, if these ghosts could somehow affect my nervous system or my hair follicles even, that maybe this, instead of electricity or electromagnetic energy, should be the line of communication, right? So we're going to communicate with the dead through hair follicles, right? Interesting idea, and I think he's an educated guy, so we got to put a little bit of trust in what he's thinking at the time. He was good enough to not do his research on people. Instead, he did his research on the Venus flytrap. Anybody who knows these plants knows that they have tiny little hairs inside them. It's a set of jaws, and if an insect or something flies in, it'll clamp shut, right? And so he had the idea that maybe this hairs on the Venus flytrap were similar. And he spent a lot of time measuring feedback, putting sensors on the jaws of the Venus flytrap and getting recordings, and then intentionally setting them off with, a little toothpick or something like that, and then seeing what the reading is. And then he later kind of figured out that there was this little tiny 20 millivolt charge coming off of these plants right before they were about to close, and that maybe that was the instance when the hairs were being activated. And so he set up something that looks similar to this, and I'll talk about this picture in a second. An electrode on the top and bottom jaw of the Venus flytrap, put the Venus flytrap in a glass enclosure so nothing could interfere with it, or insects or dust couldn't get in there, and then just measured the pulses coming off of it. And he got tiny little pulses over and over. And he believed after a time of watching or listening to these pulses that they seemed to be patterned. They had a pattern to them. A pattern enough that he believed that maybe there was an intelligent force controlling them. And he cites one moment where he was so aggravated with not being able to translate this to Morse code or something that he knew, that he just said, for 5 minutes, don't make any pulses, and it didn't, right? Fortunately, nobody was in the room when that happened. He did get some other people to come see this, and many people did say that these pulses seemed intelligent. Specifically, the Institute for Parapsychology of the Foundation for Research, that sounds like a very important organization. I understand that that was a small arm of Duke University, and Duke went, nah, we're disassociating ourselves. The Institute for Parapsychology sent somebody, and that person said, yeah, it seems like there's intelligent patterns coming from these plants. But he's very old, and he should probably retire and stop working on this. So he did, and nothing more happened to it. This picture I thought was interesting. Some of you may have seen it before. Apparently, Make Magazine published a hack that you could get Venus flytraps to open and close by shoving voltage at them. And I noticed when I was reading the article that they used the exact same points that were in his research. So I don't know if there was some cross-education there, or the research came out with the same answers as to where those electrodes would go. I'm going to jump to 1980, 80 through 92. There's kind of a long space here of when this happened. This is a group, I'm not good with French, I'm going to butcher some German later too. Cercle d'études sur la transcommunication, Luxembourg. I'm going to refer to that as CETL, settle. I'll just call it settle for now. The translation I understand to mean the Transcommunication Studies Circle. So it sounds a little more important or big than they really were. But, they had a letterhead and a nice little logo, so it must have been the real deal. They were founded by these two people. This is Maggie and Jules Harsch-Fischbach. This is a later picture from the 80s. They were a little bit younger, but I had a hard time finding pictures of them back then. They used a lot of these different practices. They used a lot of the EVP, the electronic voice phenomena practices that I talked about in the other talk, and they created some new methods and ideas to communicate with the dead, and they did this in an ongoing lab. What they decided over time was that they needed something called a bridge. This bridge was a bridge between here and beyond, and as long as that bridge existed, different devices could probably use that bridge for communication. And they used many different devices all the way up to the radios, the phones, and up through a Commodore 64, which I'll talk about in a little bit. There was some precedence to using computers for this, which is kind of interesting. There's the Commodore 64. There's a bunch of those downstairs in the mezzanine, which is kind of cool. This gentleman, I couldn't find a very good picture of him, Manfred Bowden. This was taken in Radio Luxembourg. He's the guy on the right. Bowden was interested in computers. He was an avid CBer in the 80s. He had a Commodore 64, and he was typing in. You'd get the magazine, and you'd have to type in the whole program by hand off the magazine. And he was typing in a biorhythms program. And while he was typing it, he believed the code changed in front of his eyes. And in fact, it happened a few times, and he had somebody to come over and say, did you see that? I saw it. Did you see it? And several people said, yes, this really happened. I managed to get this output print, and this is the German I'm going to try to butcher. The underlined sections here, let's see. Ich bin da, I believe, is I am here. Du stirbst, anybody with German help me with that? Are you dead or you will die? Is it future tense? You will die. Okay, future tense. You will die, Manfred. 1982, an Unfall's accident, right? So somebody was sending him a message through the computer by changing the program while he was typing to say, you will die. And this happened several times throughout the program. You will die in an accident. Interesting, he died of a heart attack in 1990. But there it is, you know, so a little bit of evidence of ghosts using computers. I'll jump back to, so he was not associated with Settle, he was elsewhere in Luxembourg. Settle got so good at this, and they developed this bridge and kept the bridge, that ghosts started using their Commodore 64 as a sort of Dropbox. And they would just put they would put text files and images, and they would wake up in the morning, turn on the computer, and oh, look, we received a message from the dead. And I have some examples of that here. This is, now these, the resolution on these images is a little wacky. Settle was producing a journal back in the 80s and 90s, which I understand to be almost like a fanzine that was Xeroxed. So this has been printed, Xeroxed, and then scanned back onto the internet where I found it. Some of these I shot out of a book that I have, but they all pretty much look like this. This is an image from the dead, right? They're sending a photograph. This is, to the right, Hal Roach. Somebody might recognize that name. He's the guy who created Little Rascals, or Our Gang. Looks pretty young in this picture, but apparently when you're dead, you can look as young as you want. So everybody likes to look young when they're dead. This was received in 1992. On the left, there's two women there. One is Janet Meek, and the other one is Nancy Carroll. And if you heard my talk at Hope 9, Meek is a very big name in kind of the hucksterism side of EVP and using the radios. So that name's fairly easy to recognize with people who are part of this community. I say huckster, I guess I shouldn't say it so loudly, but that was my reading on it. He had a text file. Hal Roach left a text file with this one that explains that the women on the left look disembodied because they're coming through a dispassing point to the fourth plane of existence. Apparently there's multiple planes of existence when you die, and this is the fourth one. Here's an image of a man named Yang Foods. He also left some text files with his image that maybe help them decipher some ways to deal with language between the living and dead. Multiple languages, and then maybe their own languages on the other side. So some confusion there and how to work with that. Some really interesting theories came out when Settle just started to knock out all these pictures that were left on their Commodore. And some things changed from what people believed about EVP. One is, as I mentioned, they believed there had to be a bridge. So there had to be some pipeline of communication that was available that could be used back and forth, right? In order for that pipeline to exist, there had to be something on our side called a contact field. I've had a lot of problems finding a good explanation of a contact field, but what I understand generally is that everyone participating has to have good vibes. They have to feel good about it, they have to believe it, they have to not be sarcastic or agnostic about this, and they have to just feel good that they're talking to the dead. And if that field's not there, it's not going to work, right? This is a general belief. Interesting, I kind of wish that worked with Windows. I've been fighting with my little Windows laptop up here. And maybe if I just felt good about it, it would work better. That'd be nice. They also believed that you needed something, and again, many people in the room will recognize this for different reasons, stochastic resonance. So this is used in signal theory. Some of the crypto people probably use this a little bit. The idea is if you have a really weak signal, real small signal, and you can't perceive it very well, if you add white noise to it, that signal should modulate with the useful frequencies and in effect amplify itself. at which point you have a slightly amplified signal, and you can then filter the white noise back out and get a piece of that information that you couldn't get. You can get that weak signal in a stronger form, or at least a processed form. So you'll see a lot from this period forward about this white noise being part of the process. There has to be some noise in there in order for us to understand better. This is my favorite part of the theories that came out of Settle. The folks at Settle believed that not just any ghost could do this, that in fact it was dead scientists, and they were working really hard to communicate with us. So hard, in fact, that they set up a lab, and this is one of a couple images I have of the lab. It's called the Time Stream Space Lab. So this is a space lab. It is on the astral plane of Marduk. I don't know the names for them, but it's on one of the planes there. The lab is run by this lady, I'll say lady, Sweden Salter. Sweden Salter explained in some text files that she is not a dead person from Earth, but she's actually from a planet called Verid. Verid is a parallel planet to Earth, according to these text files. Kind of interesting, to her side is a picture of, I guess on her computer, of a transmission that they are about to send to Earth. And I also found this, which is a transmission that somebody in Germany said they received around that time period. So I think that was the idea there. I don't know if the people who received it were related to Settle or not. Apparently on the planet Verid, they wear fringe, kind of like that. Here's another picture of the lab. This is Sweden Salter and somebody who looks like they're dressed like the KKK in the lab outfit. I don't know exactly why they have to dress like that to do it. So here's some little pieces of history I've spit out, got us up into the 1990s. Of course, there's some contemporary manifestations of that. Some of you may have seen them, but I'm just going to go through a few of them that I've found. Software, right? There's people who are interested in this, who are programmers, and so they created software. This is a particular piece of software called EVP Maker. EVP Maker takes, you can pipe any audio into it on your computer, and it will digitally dice the audio into tenth of a second fragments, and then it will pile it back together in no particular order. And then the idea is that you're supposed to play this while you're trying to communicate with those who've passed, and the ghosts can somehow manipulate the samples, and with maybe some white noise or a little stochastic resonance, you can actually get some communication out of that. I have an audio sample I'll play real quick of what this guy sounds like, so I'm going to hop out of my slideshow here. This is a sample file that the person who wrote it published. This is using 3 different voices run through this processing software, and is during a communication if you hear a little bit of a real person in there.
Ist es bei euch etwas, was bei uns die Materie ist?
I don't hear much in there, but maybe somebody heard something in there. I understand, talking to people who do this, that this is a trained skill to be able to hear the voices. So a lot of times when you hear these samples, they'll be looped over and over and over, and if you concentrate really hard and listen to a lot of them, you'll actually start hearing voices. Funny how that works. But EVP Maker. I mentioned something kind of off the cuff. I said they're put together in no particular order. They're random, right? All the crypto people in here shaking their head, saying not random from a computer. And the folks who did this recognized that, that, you know, our version of random from a computer isn't really random, but there's a seed in there and it's close to random. But people got a little upset about that, and so the folks who use this started publishing circuits online to create external true random generators, right? And the idea with these, and again, I suspect crypto people also want to do the same thing, but the idea here was having this external device was also another place that maybe spirits could manipulate the randomness of it. This is a website called ITC Bridge. You can go to this online right now. They have a continuous stream, which I'll explain in a second. Unfortunately, that stream's been down for about a year. I hope it comes back up soon. This is a very interesting project. ITC Bridge remotely networked a sensor over Ustream and took audio, converted the audio to images via spectrogram. So this is a software program that takes audio and maps different frequencies in the audio over time. So you end up with this kind of waterfall display, either left, right, or up and down, with dots, pixels, images that represent different variables in the frequency or different loudnesses to parts of the frequency, in the hopes to see images coming from the sound. It's not running right now. I'll read the explanation of the last setup they have, and I believe he's going to do the same thing again. The gentleman who set up this website, I'm sorry, his name's Keith Clark. He has a shortwave radio in a shed. Ooh, I have a picture of the shed. Shortwave radio in a shed. Instead of being connected to an antenna, the antenna is connected to ground, to earth. There's a condenser microphone approximately 1 inch away from the radio speaker. There's an XLR cable that runs from the microphone 100 feet into the house. That runs into an audio mixer. The audio mixer is just leveling everything out and then outputs to a computer sound card. The computer is filtering some of that sound and maybe getting some of the white noise out of it. I'm not exactly sure what that filtering was intended for. And then it outputs to another computer, which is sending up to Ustream. The idea being that community members at ITC Bridge can work together, all work on the same stream, so there's multiple people looking at the same evidence, right? So there's some comparison of notes to this. And they're invited to record parts of the stream, pull stills off of it, publish images that they find on the stream, and maybe some of that audio. Interestingly, he made it very clear when he set this up that he did not expect there to be any EVP. He did not expect anybody to hear voices. This was for people who have passed, or maybe Time Stream Space Lab, to send pictures, right? Specifically for that purpose. Here's this gets on the edge of pop culture for me. This is called X Paranormal. This piece of software is produced by extremecensus.com. They have a couple of these. This you load it up on your PC. It's a Windows-based. It will find your network card and your Wi-Fi, whichever one you have. If you don't have anything plugged into your network, it will use the open jack, and it will try to read any anomalies in the signal where there shouldn't be a signal, which is kind of interesting. I didn't have a terrible amount of success with this one. They published in their adverts, they say it uses live calculations. They say it uses real-time scanning. I guess that's scanning the Wi-Fi port. It tracks something called R-flux. I had to do a little bit of a research, and you can see that flat line on the top in my version of it that says R-flux. R-flux stands for rapid singular flux quantum, and I understand this in my layman terms to be on the silicon level in computers. There can be minute fluctuations that are not intended by design, and so this is supposed to be tracking those tiny, tiny fluctuations. I read a little bit about flux quantum to see if this was feasible, and apparently it didn't work on my laptop because I don't have a cryogenic cooling package. You have to cool the silicon in order to read these fluctuations. So not a lot of luck with this one on my part. This is another one they produce. The software interface looks like it's not this blurry. It looks like a handheld recorder. The idea is that it can take multiple line inputs or microphone inputs, depending on what you want to plug in. While you're trying to communicate, you can record from various sources. It mixes them together with white noise, again, the stochastic resonance, and then filters that out and produces some kind of voice output from that. I won't give that one too much time. This is, let's see. Oh, of course, there's an app for that, right? We all have smartphones, so there's a bunch of these smartphone apps for ITC. This one is called Ghost Detector app. The author of this one, I have no idea how this one works. I really couldn't get much out of this one. This is a ghost radar. It apparently uses your GPS and Wi-Fi to detect ghosts up to a 9-mile radius. I don't know where 9 miles comes from. There's a microphone, and if you actually see a blip on the radar, you can talk, and it will use voice synthesis to possibly turn the received signals into some kind of voice. I don't know exactly how this one works. I do know how the next one works, and it may be related. This is called EMF meter. This is kind of interesting. Most of our smartphones these days have GPS on them. And part of that GPS package, or the chip that's on there, usually has a magnetometer, a sensor designed to be the compass, right? So we can find magnetic north. Not only can we figure out where we're going from the GPS, but we can figure out where magnetic north is and determine which direction we're facing in any given moment. This app and a lot of these apps apparently untether the magnetic sensor from the GPS sensor and use it as an EMF detector, EMF electromagnetic frequencies. The interesting thing about this one is I don't know if it was originally designed for ghost hunters, but you can detect your laptop spinning, or a fan, or motors, or computers, or television. So anything that puts out stray electromagnetic energy can be detected by this. And it does seem to work. Here's another version of it. This is called Ghost Catcher Camera. It does exactly the same thing. And when it sees a spike of a certain amount, it will then turn on the microphone and start flickering your camera. And you're invited to kind of run around with your phone in front of you while you're ghost hunting so that maybe you can look at them later and catch a picture of it. That's what's out there right now. There's an app for that. I take this all a little different direction. Right now I'm in the process of pulling these tools together in my own work. I've done a couple exhibitions now using these tools. I wanted to show you a failure first. Folks probably recognize that little black box as a Raspberry Pi. I've been working a lot with the Raspberry Pi. It's very malleable and cheap and nearly disposable. This particular one has a Wi-Fi adapter on it. I use a tool on this, which again, a few people in the room may recognize. It's called Airmon NG. I think most people use this to grab signals off of Wi-Fi, and though we're not supposed to, maybe look for passwords that are floating around on the Wi-Fi. I do something a little different with it. I take the signal off of Airmon that I get in local Wi-Fi systems, and I pipe it through to a program called SOX. This is referred to as a Swiss Army knife of audio. SOX is a fabulous program. You can take anything and pipe it into SOX and get audio out the other end. And then I run the audio into a spectrogram software to see if I can catch some of these images. Anybody who's heard a Wi-Fi signal knows that it's very sharp and sporadic. And what I ended up with from this particular project is mostly just peaks of white and then nothing, and then a peak of white and then a little bit of signal, and that's about it. I want to keep working with it. I think it's an interesting idea. Maybe I should spend some time in New York City where there's a little more Wi-Fi than where I am. Maybe some white noise needs to be added. That always seems to always be the answer. This is this recently exhibited and is going off to Ireland pretty soon. I refer to this as my Ghost Vox machine. I built it inside the case of an old radio police scanner from the 60s, I believe. Again, a Raspberry Pi inside of here. A little different idea here. This has a small, untuned antenna on no particular frequency with no loop to tune it. Amplified. It's fairly broadband signal I'm capturing. I'm using that signal as basically a random generator. I'm then taking the random bits that I get out of that and I'm mapping it out to phoneme database, right? Phonemes, for folks that are not familiar, are the tiniest part of speech in our language. So not just syllables or letters of the alphabet, but the individual sounds. So t, k, like that, right? Phonemes. I'll play a little piece from this. Kind of interesting output that I got out of this one. It's very chatty. Sometimes over an hour, I think I hear my name. I have a one-syllable name. I'm going to release that setup pretty soon. I'm pretty excited about it. Get some interesting sounds out of this. The other one I have, and I'll move along pretty quickly here. I see we only have probably 10 minutes or so left. Similar untuned antenna going into a propeller microcontroller. This is another microcontroller that doesn't run an operating system. And I have this one taking the random set and using it to basically generate an A-life algorithm to produce an image. And I'm building a series of fairly large LED screens to project this on. This is 3 foot by 4 foot. You can hear the other guy talking away in the background. This is in the same gallery. 50-50 on this one. I haven't seen too many good screaming faces or anything like that. Sometimes it looks like landscape to me. I got one more here I'll show you guys, and in fact, I'll play an old bottle cap. Now, this has been my most successful one, and in fact, I'm rather pleased with it, and I've asked to give a workshop on how to build this. Thank you. And that workshop's going to be running at 4 o'clock today down in the mezzanine. I'll tell you a little more about it. This is a electromagnetic vibration microphone, so both. So it can be a contact mic to detect vibrations on hard surfaces, or there's also a coil in there that bypasses the audio pickup from a microphone and just captures electromagnetic signals, maybe what comes off of our TVs, laptops, things like that. And then I run it into the microphone on a PC, sometimes the PC I'm monitoring. And this will work on either Linux, Mac, Windows. I found software to do it on all of them, and generate images based off that audio. They're very blurry, and they're very small images, and sometimes I think it helps if you stand very far away and squint. This is maybe a room full of people, or a chiptune concert, I'm not sure. I'll let you guys guess. If you really squint at this one, I think there's something in there. I've been fairly pleased with this output, though. I don't do a lot of post-processing to it, so I'll grab the images and then I'll just enlarge them so they're bigger than a postage stamp. Thus a little bit blurry, but again, I think the noise helps a little bit. I've been told that looks like my head with devil horns. I don't know. And my workshop. The workshop's at 4 o'clock. You can build one of these little bottle cap microphones, and I'll help you set up on whatever you're working with to do the waterfall software and capture your own images. Do what you want. Email me. Tell me all about it. I have little kits. They're about $6 is the cost of them. You have to bring your own bottle cap, so you may want to stop and get some Club Mate on the way. It's just a case to hold the whole thing in. The workshop's listed for 3 hours. I'm going to hang out for 3 hours. I suspect if you've never soldered before, this will take you about a half hour. If you've soldered before, you can probably do it in 10 minutes. And I've published the whole thing on the wiki, on the Hope Wiki. So if you don't have any interest in this, or there's so many awesome talks going on, you can just grab the parts list and the instructions later and try it yourself. If you do, please email me. Let me know if you catch anything. Or use it in an exhibit or a performance or something like that. I'd love to hear about it. Is it worth questions? Do we have enough time? I don't know. I can't see out there at all, so yeah, maybe if there are questions. Yeah.
So it seems from the historical aspect that the methods of detecting the ghosts progress with technology that is available.
Yeah.
Right? Did you look into compression artifacts of MP3s or something like that?
Yeah.
Did you really strongly compress it? Maybe you can hear some ghosts there.
Yeah, I've actually done process work before I got involved with this project on that exact thing, and it's come to my mind, nobody in this community has gone that direction yet. I'm very interested in it, and you're right, there's a lot of beautiful noise in those when you really compress something. Yeah, it's amazing. Anything else?
No, it's not a crystal ball effect, and you're just not concentrating on something and emerging from your own consciousness.
I'm sorry, the crystal ball?
Yeah, it's in other words, it was just a device to focus the attention, and then the unconscious comes.
Yeah, I think the subtle people believe that. I kind of believe it. I think if this is something you really believe works, you could probably do it with a pen. I think you're absolutely right. The technologies and material. I am interested in the fact that a lot of times people who engage with this technology do so because they don't know how it works, which is kind of fascinating, right? So there's already some mysticism. I don't know how to program this. It just does its thing, right? So maybe it does other things too. That's interesting to me, but yeah, I think you're right. I think it could be any technology or object, right? Good, thanks. I see one way in the back, and then I guess I'll let you go. Yeah. Yeah, I actually just did a straight up lookup table, and I ranged the signal coming in to the number of elements in my data table and let it decide. That's all there is to it. I'm using, there's a library on Linux that I'm using for that called Festival, I believe, that's designed for the blind, speech for the blind, right? If anybody has other questions, I'll be at that down in the mezzanine B area. That's not the one near the escalator. I'm going to hang out down there for 3 hours, so if you don't want to build the kit and you just want to ask questions, I'm happy to talk with anybody about this too. Thank you. Well, I'll catch you later. Thanks.
Hello, Hope. Before we get started with the next presentation, a couple of brief announcements. First of all, if you're interested in hanging anything on the walls throughout the conference, you're perfectly welcome to. Just make sure you use the blue painter's tape. If you don't have any, stop by our security desks and we'll give you some. Because any other kind of tape will get us in trouble with this lovely hotel. So blue tape only. There are some high capacity talks coming up, keynotes and that sort of thing. At any point throughout the conference, if a room is filled to capacity and you leave the room, you cannot re-enter the room because someone else will have taken your place by then. So if you don't want to miss out on the end of a talk, don't leave in the middle of it. Beyond that, standard conference rules. Remember the 5-2-1 rule. Every day of a conference, get 5 hours of sleep, 2 square meals, and 1 shower. This is how we take care of ourselves and those around us and those sitting next to us. So without much further ado, I'm very happy to present to you Charles Duan with Hacking the Patent System.
Hi there. Thanks for the introduction. I'm really happy to be here. This is hopefully going to be an interesting talk. I've titled it Hacking the Patent System. It's different from the EFF paper called Hacking the Patent System. Basically, so my name is Charles Duan. I am the director of the Patent Reform Project in an organization called Public Knowledge. We're an organization that does DC-based advocacy on technology and policy issues. And so I noticed that we have kind of 2 patent talks back to back. There's another one at 4 o'clock. And that one I think will go into some more of the really specific laws. But I want to use this talk as kind of an appetizer to, what's your appetite in terms of, what are the problems with the patent system and what exactly is going on. And, the one thing that I'm pretty sure most of you have heard of are patent trolls. These are people who, they take these really silly patents on, sending emails or scanning documents, and they make these outrageous demands. They say, like, you have to pay me $1,000 if you use a scanner, or you have to pay me $100,000 if, you send email in this way. And they send these, to a lot of these really small companies that can't afford to fight them. And kind of to top it off, they don't make anything. So, you've got these companies going out there saying to all of you guys, you're not allowed to write computer programs or do all the cool stuff you're doing, and we're not going to give you anything in exchange except for demand letters. This is besides patent trolls. I think a lot of you have heard about some of these patent wars, like the one between Apple and Samsung. These involve, more silly patents. Some of the ones on rounded corners you've probably heard of. You've probably heard of the Amazon patent on photography against a white background. So there are a lot of things going on that I think make people in our community think there's something really wrong with the patent system, and there is something really wrong with the patent system. But the other thing I get when I talk to people in these sorts of groups is this sense that this patent system is this arcane thing that I can't understand. I don't know what's going on with it, and I don't know what to do. And it's sort of the sense of hopelessness that there's no way to fix this thing. And this conference is called Hope, so I am here to give you hope. There is something you can do to fix this. With your help and with your work, we'll be able to actually make it better. But in order to do that, we first have to actually understand what's going on. Now, I don't imagine that too many of you do much work in legal policy, but I do imagine that a lot of you know about security. And the way I would encourage you to think about the problems with the patent system is like a security vulnerability. The patent system is basically like a computer system, right? It takes certain inputs, patent applications. It does some processing on it. The patent examiners do some examination on it, and it produces some outputs. It produces patents. And a lot of times, this works okay, and you get the data that you're expecting. And a lot of times, people figure out ways to send carefully crafted data that gets out results that you're not supposed to be able to get, namely the kinds of silly patents on rounded corners or sending emails. So I would encourage you to think about some of the problems in that way. to look at the ways that people are taking advantage of the system in order to get things out of it that they're not really supposed to get out of it. And so, to start off figuring out what that is, we have to look at, how is the patent system supposed to work? The way it's supposed to work is that patents are an exchange between the inventors on the one hand and the public on the other. The inventor, they invent something, they create something new, they spend a lot of time, figuring out how they want to make this product work and how to get it to be useful, and they provide that information to the public. That's the inventor's part of the bargain. And in exchange, the public, through the government, gives the inventor certain rights, certain monopoly rights. They say, all right, since you invented this, you get this patent, you get to do all of these special things with it, and you get to keep other people from doing that. So this is meant to be kind of an equal bargain. The inventor has to provide something, the public provides something. And when we look at, what's on both sides of the bargain, the person who receives a patent, they get a lot of rights. You get to, if you own a patent, you get to keep other people from making, from using, from selling, from offering to sell, and selling includes giving away for free, so even offering to give away for free, from selling parts, from telling other people how to use an invention, from importing an invention into the United States, from exporting parts of the invention out of the United States. These are a lot of rights. If you hold a patent and you see somebody else doing any one of those things, you have a reason to go after them and sue them for potentially a lot of money or to tell them to stop doing it. So the patent is a very, very powerful thing. And in exchange, the patent owner is expected to do a lot of work in order to get that patent. So the person has to invent something. That invention has to fall within certain categories of what is allowed to receive a patent. They have to come up with something that's new. They have to come up with something that's non-obvious. These are these are supposed to be pretty hard tests. There are a lot of things that you and I would know how to do. You're not supposed to be able to get patents on that because it would be considered obvious. You have to file this really detailed patent application that explains exactly how the thing works, exactly all of the aspects of it. You have to put in all these drawings. It can be a very expensive and very complicated thing to put together a patent application. And then you have to go to the patent examiner and go through, 2, 3, 5 years of examination and, explain to them why this invention is really interesting. This is a lot of work, and it demands that you have some sort of really good invention. So, that's why we feel it's okay to provide, all of these really powerful rights on the left, because you have to do all of that work on the right, and you have to give something really useful. So, that's how it's supposed to work. But if you want to take advantage of the patent system, your goal would be to try to get as many of those rights as you can on the left side without having to do any of the work on the right side. So we want to see, how do you do that? And the example I'm going to give you is I'm going to show you how to get a patent on this. Okay, this is a 3-line computer program written in BASIC. I'm pretty sure most of you can figure out what it does, but just for people who are only listening, this is a program that compares two numbers. If one of the numbers is less than the number, then the program stops. Otherwise, it subtracts and it adds two numbers. That's it. All right, so obviously you're not supposed to be able to get a patent on that, right? This is a mathematical formula. This is really simple. All of you probably do this all the time. So how do we get a patent on this? Well, first of all, I need to flesh out this program a little bit because this thing wouldn't really work right now. So I'm gonna. Okay, so sorry. Before we talk about that, the way I'm gonna do this is I'm gonna take advantage of a number of cases, and I'm gonna sprinkle the case law in here. And the first case I'm going to start with is this one called Diamond versus Deere, which has a line that says claims have to be considered as a whole. A claim is a part of a patent that defines, what you think you invented. And this is the part that the courts are going to look at, that the lawyers are going to look at. This is the part that's important to your patent. And the goal is going to be to make this claim as a whole look really complicated, even though it's really only covering this 3-line computer program. So how do we do that? Okay, so first of all, I'm gonna say, instead of just saying like just random variables, I'm gonna give the variable some names. I'm gonna do this in the banking sector context. So, I'm gonna talk about an account. I'm gonna talk about 2 accounts. So you've got account 1 and account 2. And I'm going to change the variable to exchange. So basically now this is just a little program about exchanging money from one account to another. Everybody see how that works? This should be pretty straightforward. I'm pretty sure that most of you have done this at some point in your life if you've exchanged money with somebody. So we need to declare our variables, right? That is kind of how computer programs work. So we need to do that. Let's put in an input-output statement so that we actually, receive some data, because, you need to know how much money to exchange before you can exchange the money. And, I'll throw in a couple print statements just so, we know what happened. As you can see, all the things I've added, these are just, very conventional things that you would ordinarily do in a computer program just to get the thing to work. Lots of law out there saying that adding these sorts of steps doesn't contribute anything to patentability. And I think all of you would understand that, adding a couple of print statements shouldn't make something patentable. So here we got this computer program, which I've just fleshed out a little bit, but it really is that same program. So starting from here, let's go for writing some real patent language. All right. So we're going to start out with a computer system. We're going to talk about computer system. Computer system, that doesn't sound so complicated. Let's call it a data processing system. Data processing system. What does a data processing system have? Well, it's got a keyboard and it's got a keyboard controller. Something to receive the data from the keyboard. But keyboard, that's kind of a conventional term too. Let's call it a communications controller and a first-party device. Because that sounds a little fancier, right? First-party device, and now maybe we're talking about some network stuff. It sounds better. Okay, so we've got communications controller, first-party device, coupled to said communications controller. What else does a computer have? It's got a memory, right? But memory, that's kind of conventional. Let's call it a data storage unit, and it's got a CPU. Instead of calling it a CPU, we'll call it a computer, but we'll also mention, by the way, that the computer is coupled to a said data storage unit and said communication controller, just in case you weren't sure that your CPU was connected to your keyboard, right? All right. So now we've got this, and this is a lot of text just to explain what a computer is, right? So why are we spending so much time just explaining what a computer is? Well, it's because we have a number of cases out there. One of which was this case called Bilski versus Kappos. I'm just quoting something out of the Patent Office's guidelines, which says that recitation of a machine or transformation, either express or inherent, weighs in favor of patent eligibility. So that means that if you're talking about a machine, it sounds a whole lot more like it ought to be patentable than if you just talk about an equation. So the more I make this look like a machine, the better a place I seem to be. So as a result, I'm going to spend a lot of time just, explaining, okay, what parts of a computer I have, even though these are all just very generic parts of a computer. All right, so let's move on to what this computer actually does. So you remember we declared our variable, so we'll have a data storage having stored therein a first account balance and a second account balance, right? That reflects the two lines I got there. But first account balance, second, that makes sense. We can't use words that make sense. So we're going to say information about a first party, or information about a first account for a first party, and information about a third account for a second party. But we can flesh that out even more. We can say that the information about the first account for the first party is independent from a second account maintained from a first exchange institution. And the same thing about the second account. Now, all that says is that the information that I am storing in this computer is also somewhere else, right? All I said is that, this information in the computer, it's also on some other computer. it doesn't add anything to the actual operation of the computer. It doesn't add anything to the complexity of the system. It just says, this is what the data happens to be. There are a lot of Supreme Court cases that say, this stuff doesn't matter, but it makes the thing look really long, so, we like it. All right, what else can we do? So okay, now we're going to get this input statement. So you remember I had this computer that was coupled to the data storage unit and said communication controller because, apparently we didn't know that computers were connected to keyboards. What does this computer do? So we're going to spend a lot of time talking about this very simple algorithm. And the reason for that is that there are a couple of cases that are out there that say that if you spend a lot of time explaining an algorithm, that algorithm turns the computer into this special purpose computer. And because it's a special purpose computer, now suddenly the thing is patentable, whereas a general computer is not. So, there's one case that was actually decided just last year that decided that a patent was, perfectly eligible, and the reason for that was that it required it had a lot of steps, and these steps required intricate and complex computer programming. Now, if any of you actually read that patent, I'll give you a little background on this one. This was a patent on the technology of displaying an ad before watching a video online. How many of you think that requires intricate and complex computer programming? Now the lights are off, and I'm pretty sure there are no hands up. Yes, lots of problems there, but we're going to try. We're going to try to make this thing look like it requires intricate and complex computer programming. So how are we going to do that? All right. We're going to receive an exchange amount from the keyboard, right? That was the first thing that we did. We received some data from the keyboard. Receive an exchange amount. We're going to say receive a transaction, because transaction, that's kind of a fancy thing, right? This part about being from the keyboard, remember we didn't call it a keyboard, we call it a first-party device. And just in case you forget, we're going to receive it via the communications controller. So now we've got the actual steps of comparing the data. And so, a simple way of explaining that, which I put up on the screen, is, we adjust the accounts based on the transaction. We call it a transaction, so I'll call it a transaction again. If the accounts have sufficient balances, right? So we're going to do a comparison to see if it has the accounts have sufficient balances, and then if they do, we're going to adjust the accounts, right? This makes sense, which means that we have to fix it. Instead of saying just adjust the accounts, let's say electronically adjust the first account and the third account, because instead of just saying accounts, we can list them, and that adds more words. Based on the transaction, that's a very simple way of saying things. Let's say in order to effect an exchange obligation arising from said transaction. You see, I've introduced this new term, right? Exchange obligation. What's an exchange obligation? Well, you have to do the exchange. Well, what's the computer going to do? It's going to do the exchange. So all I've done is really introduce a term that, describes what is happening. Again, it's not any real substance to this, but it does make it seem like there's more going on. And then, I'll mention again that it's between the first party and the second party, simply because I can. And then this part about if the accounts have sufficient balances, that's, again, very simple. So instead we're going to say, after ensuring that said first party and or said second party have adequate value in said first account and or said third account respectively. Read through that again, and you'll notice that all that's really saying is just compare two numbers. But, this sounds like it's a pretty complicated operation, because of the fact that they say and or there, which, means that you could do it that way, or you could compare some other numbers. It sounds like there's more meat to this. But really, all we're talking about in, this half page of text is comparing two numbers. That's what I've got in line 40 over there. And then if the comparison succeeds, then we decrement one account and we increment the other account. And then finally, we've got this print statement which is, we just print a message about the amount that's being exchanged. And so, what I've written over there is just generate a message about the transaction. But instead, this is actually a good audience participation time. Does anybody have a thought for what to say here? You can just yell it out. Come on, just make up something. Tell me something. Tell me something that you would say to make a print statement look fancy.
Generate an electronic output chronicling the details of the transaction.
Excellent. Generate an electronic output chronicling the details of the transaction. In a human readable format. I like it. Anybody else? Wait, somebody said electrons, which means we actually got physics into this thing now. All right. All right. The actual thing they put in here is generate an instruction to said first exchange institution and or said second exchange institution to adjust said second account and or said fourth account in accordance with the adjustment of said first account and or said third account, wherein said instruction be an I can't do that. Wherein said instruction being an irrevocable time invariant obligation based on said first exchange institution and or said second exchange institution. All right, anybody thought they could come up with that one? All right, this is why they pay the lawyers the big bucks, right? All right. It actually sounds like there might be something more going on in there. So, let's take a look at what's going on exactly here. Generate an instruction to said first exchange institution and or said second exchange institution. Well, we're just saying, where the instruction goes. And, if the print statement is read by the right person, that's where it went. So, again, that first part, it really just says what the data is used for. It has nothing to do with what the computer is doing. To adjust said second account or said fourth account, that's just talking about what the exchange institution should do when it receives it. This patent claim, it doesn't actually say the exchange institution has to do anything. It just says the instruction has to explain that. And you'll see in the print statement that I have there, it just says, here's an instruction to the institution, do this. And everything that you read in this patent suggests that that's enough. In accordance with the adjustment of said first account and or said third account, well, I just printed out the amount that's exchanged. That's that. And then this business about wherein said instruction is an irrevocable time invariant obligation placed on said first exchange institution and or said second exchange institution. Now, that sounds a little bit like, there's some sort of database locking going on here. And if there were some database locking going on in here, I would actually say that's kind of an interesting thing because, database locking is a very hard thing to do. Coordination among different threads, that's a pretty complicated thing. And, if they talked about like different methods of, locking databases, that could actually be kind of cool. But you read through the patent application, they don't say a thing about it. They just say, well, people know how to lock databases, so just tell them to. And I mean, so if all we're doing is we're just saying, do this, then if I just say, here's an instruction, and by the way, it happens to be irrevocable and time invariant, and you happen to obey that, then the implementation behind that is kind of irrelevant. And as far as the patent application goes, from what I've read through it, it doesn't seem to require any special way of doing that. It doesn't seem to require any particular database technology. As far as I can tell, really all they're requiring there is just telling somebody, by the way, this happens to be the way I want it to be. So really, I think that all of this text more or less boils down to just one print statement. But you see just how much stuff I generated out of that. Right? And, all of you guys, you came up with all sorts of other things, and, that's basically what happens in a lot of these patents. We hear a lot about the patent on, scanning documents to emails. And, when you read through, like, the title of the patent application, and if you actually spend a lot of time figuring out what's going on in the patent application, in that one, I've done this, I did this a couple months ago, it does turn out that all they really are saying they've invented is scanning something in email. But they don't write a patent claim that says scanning to email. They write some huge behemoth like this that sounds like, you're doing all of this fancy one-touch, automatic processing, all sorts of things. And I think what happens is that it tends to impress a lot of people. But when you actually get down and think about what they're talking about, it really doesn't amount to much. I mean, sorry, I keep hitting the wrong button. Here's the entirety of the patent claims that we just talked about. This is a lot of text. This is a lot of text to explain what is basically this 7-line computer program that really amounts to the 3 lines I showed you before. And that's basically what you see in a lot of these patents. One of these days, the next time you see one of these patents that somebody is talking about, they're saying this is a silly patent on photography or something. Jump back to the end of the document. Take a look at it, and just look at how much they've written. You may be able to understand, you may not. There are a lot of fancy words that get thrown around in patent claims. But if you really spend the time to understand it, you'll often find that they are much simpler than their length would suggest. So, okay, now I get to show you the slide which I kept accidentally showing you. That thing that I just showed you, that's an actual patent claim. This is the patent that it came from. This is a patent by a guy named Ian Shepard. It's owned by a company called Alice Corporation. Some of you may have heard the name Alice Corporation. Because that is the name of one of the parties to a recent Supreme Court case called Alice versus CLS Bank. Many of you have probably heard about this case as not completely eliminating, but making it much harder to get software patents. That case decided basically that all of that fancy text that I just showed you, even with all the discussion of computers and everything, really amounted to nothing more than a basic equation, or really just a basic method of conducting financial transactions. And as a result, it wasn't eligible for being a patent. And the Supreme Court figured this out, but think of how much work it took before the Supreme Court got to that point. Alice filed for this patent application. They went to the patent office. They convinced patent examiners that this was a really complicated and interesting thing. They convinced the patent office of this, I think 6 or 7 times. They have something like 6 or 7 patents on this technology, all of which are really long and detailed. And all of which more or less talk about the same thing. And then they get their patents, and then they go off and they start asserting their patents against one of the biggest financial companies in the world. They get involved in, I think, 3 or 4 years of patent litigation, and they convince several courts that this thing is valid, and they convinced 5 out of 10 judges on the lower appeals court that this thing was valid and that they ought to be able to get a patent on it. And then they go to the Supreme Court, and I went to the Supreme Court to watch this case being argued, and the justices had stacks of the briefs on their desks, and the stacks were something like this high, right? This is how much paper was written over it, just to explain what was going on in these patents and why was this bad for, the economy and people. And, only after all that work did the Supreme Court finally, explain, no, this is not actually any super awesome thing. This is just adding numbers to a bank account. This happens all the time, and most of the cases don't get to the Supreme Court. It's unfortunate, but it's the case. Very few, almost none of the cases will get to the Supreme Court. Almost none of the cases will get to even an appeals level. And the cases that get to an appeals level are a tiny fraction of the cases that are just fought in the trial courts, and the cases that are fought in the trial courts are just a tiny fraction of the demand letters that are sent out to small companies or people who are just using technology. So there are a lot of these things out there. This is a very well-known technique, and a lot of people have been using it. So I guess the question then is, that's the exploit, so what's the bug? And I wrote a little article about this. If any of you are interested in reading works of fiction on how the patent office works, this is probably the only article on this subject. This is a story about the Amazon white background photography patent, which I imagine a lot of you have heard of at some point. Basically, it's a patent on a particular way of arranging you know, like an object and the camera and the lamps and things, so that you get photographs with like a nice white background. And a lot of people complain about this, but what I did at some point a couple of weeks ago was, you know, I went through the patent, I went through, you know, again, very long claims, and figure out what is going on here. And what happened here is, I'll cite another piece of law here. There's a case that was decided just a couple weeks ago. It was a case about hearing aids. I'll tell you about this case. This is kind of interesting. It's a case about hearing aids, and you know, the company that had the patent, they said, we've got this patented hearing aid. They're suing all these other people, and one of the other guys says, well, actually, you know, we found this other hearing aid that predates your hearing aid by like 5 years. So, you know, remember that new non-obvious stuff? Like, you shouldn't get your patent. The patent office agreed with them, the board agreed with them, and actually, you know, even the appeals court agreed with them. But the patent owner, the person who owned the patent on the hearing aid, they had another claim. And this other claim said, oh yeah, we got the whole hearing aid, and it has a plug. Just a plug. Actually, they didn't describe it as a plug. They described it as a multi-pronged electrical connection for transmitting data or something like that. The patent examiner, when they actually saw this the first time around, they said, "That's a plug. You can't add a plug to a hearing aid. Somebody get a patent on that." But then, you know, when it went up through the chain, and when it went up to the appeals court, they said, well, you know, the examiners just said that, but the examiner didn't show any evidence of that. The examiner just, you know, said this was out of common sense. And the board cannot accept general conclusions about what is basic knowledge or common sense as a replacement of documentary evidence. So basically what they're saying is, you know, unless you actually have like this piece of paper in front of you that says hearing aids have plugs, you can't just use your common sense to know that you could add a plug to anything. And as a result, you know, their patent stood up. Not the part about the hearing aid, but the part about attaching a plug to it. Because of the fact that, you know, the law requires this sort of very, very stringent evidence. Who, the judges?
Yes.
Well, I'm not going to make fun of the judges other than to point you to the recent ethical scandal about Judge Randall Rader, which is probably unrelated to this. One of the issues that we do see, just, you know, more generally, is there is this very kind of cozy relationship between a lot of the, like, among the patent bar and among the patent office, and among a lot of, and among, you know, the people who decide these sorts of things. So, you know, I'm going to jump ahead to this slide. So, you know, this is kind of getting into the problem of what can we do. You know, there are a lot of opportunities for us to explain what's going on, but the problem is that, you know, who is talking to the patent office right now? How many of you know that on Tuesday, the patent office is holding a public meeting to discuss software patents? I thought I saw a hand somewhere up there. I think I see one hand. Okay, so good. There are a couple of people. You should all know this. There's a public meeting to discuss software patents. There is currently a rulemaking. There's currently not a rulemaking, but a request for public comments on how to decide what patents are eligible, particularly software patents. There are a lot of opportunities actually to give input to the patent office, but the fact of the matter is that, you know, when the patent office provides one of these opportunities, they send it out to the mailing list, and, you know, who's subscribing to the mailing list? It's the patent lawyers. So the patent lawyers will all show up to this meeting on Tuesday. And me. And you know, because of the fact that this has become such a big thing, there will actually be a number of people who are working on the patent reform side who will be showing up to this, and I think that's good. But you know, I think the thing that we really need to show people is that this is a huge community of people who really care about, you know, about technology and about the ability to, you know, create and develop and make new things. There's a sense, I think, among a lot of the people that are, you know, very within the patent system that, you know, patents are an incentive to creating inventions. There doesn't seem to be much else, so therefore patents are the only incentive to creating inventions. So therefore, you know, the only thing we should be doing is making patents as strong as possible because that'll get us the most inventions. Now, I'll bet that a lot of the people in this room have invented something, probably something that is worthy of a patent. And I'll bet that a lot of you have not filed for a patent application on it. Why? Because, you know, we invent things for other reasons. We invent things because they're cool, or because it's fun, or because it's useful, or because, you know, I want to show it off to my friends. The whole open source movement is based on this, right? The idea that I make things because they're useful and they benefit the world. Not because I'm going to make a lot of money off of them, or because I'm going to demand, you know, that long list of patent rights that you get from having a patent. You know, there are lots of reasons that people make things. Even, you know, the for-profit startup community, you know, they build their technology as fast as possible, not because they're hoping that they can take over the market through patent rights, but because they're hoping that, you know, by being fast and being agile, they can, you know, they can create a whole new industry, you know, like the next Facebook or the next Twitter. There are lots of incentives out there, but the incentives that get talked about whenever I go to the patent office and whenever I talk to patent attorneys is it's just patents. It's, you know, we need more patents because otherwise we won't have more inventions. And a lot of times that tends to be the message we get. The thing is that the people who will give the real message that's, you know, no, there are lots of reasons that we make things and sometimes patents get in the way of that, you know, those people are in this room. Those people are the people who often are saying, you know, I'd really just want to be making stuff. You have to be telling that to, you know, to some of these, to, you know, the people who are decision makers. You know, I said at the beginning that we, that you know, we should think about the problems with the patent system as kind of security exploits. And one of the places where that analogy breaks down, this is one of my favorite XKCD comics, which I think is tangentially on patents. One of the places where I think that incentive breaks down is that normally when you report a security vulnerability, everybody agrees that it's bad and that we should fix it. Now, sometimes there's like inertia, or sometimes there's a desire for, you know, the company to be secret about it or not like tell other people that there's a security vulnerability. But, you know, I think everybody agrees that security vulnerabilities are problems that need to be fixed. Whereas when you get to, you know, basically bugs in the legal system that allow for things that are not supposed to happen, you actually have people who are in support of the bugs. Right? Because they make a lot of money off of them. You know, so what's going on in this comic, if you can't read it, is this guy, he says, dude, I had this idea like some 5 years ago and some company is getting rich doing it. I want my cut. And he goes to this website called the Department of Ideas and said, I came up with this idea 5 years ago. And then, you know, waits a couple of weeks and in the mail he gets this box of money. What I think has happened is that a lot of people have started looking at the patent system, you know, not as an incentive to actually go out and make stuff, but as kind of a lottery ticket. You know, I file my patent application and maybe 5-10 years down the road, I'll just sit around and wait for other companies to make the same thing, and then I'll just go ask for my box of money. That's not really how the patent system is supposed to work, right? What I said at the beginning was patents are supposed to be information exchange for monopoly. The information that's being exchanged, you know, with a patent like I just showed you is very minimal. You know, that's not anything that any of you didn't know, you know, how to add two numbers. But, you know, they're going off trying to collect a lot of money. And because of the fact that they make a lot of money off of this, they have very strong incentives to keep the system the way it is. And they're spending a lot of time lobbying the patent office, saying, don't change the system, don't mess with it, don't like change the incentives or anything. They spend a lot of money going to Congress saying, if you mess with the patent system, like all the invention's going to go overseas to China or something. They spend a lot of time talking about this. And for many years, they were really the only voice talking about this, especially on Capitol Hill and, within the government. But recently, I think, some of the other people, including like some of the smaller technology companies, some of the like mobile app developers I've seen, a lot of the like non-technology companies, a lot of restaurants have been showing up in Congress saying, no, actually, these patents, they're actually not helping the economy, particularly in our areas. And so I think what we need to do if we really want to fix this, I can give you the specifics on, where's the right place to comment on, or where's the right place to submit filings, or where's the right place to write about this. But really it requires that, we all be active in pointing out how important technology is to us, and how important it is that we don't have patents that are getting in the way of, real invention and real innovation. So, I think I'll wrap up my talk because I see there's one question. Yeah.
So, from the very meaning of the word patent, transparent. The original purpose of patents was to prevent knowledge loss through trade secrets.
Yes.
So, in exchange for you tell us how you did this,
Yep.
and we'll give you the. When was this lost? It appears to have completely been lost in the debate.
Yeah. So that's still is. I mean, it still is there. But the thing is that there are a lot of people, especially the ones who just have the patents right now, who want to say, well, patents are kind of like a property right. So, I've got them, and I really don't want anybody to be touching them. And you end up with this debate that ends up being very much over like economics and, like property rights and all these things. And they forget really about those basic principles, that patents are supposed to be a way of encouraging innovation and getting people to discuss their secrets and talk about how things work and not hide them.
Encouraging
Yeah.
innovation.
Yeah, they're about getting. Yeah, they're about getting Coca-Cola to give out the secret formula.
Isn't it the examiners who have really lost the program there, and not the people who are applying for the patents? Like, shouldn't a patent examiner take a look at an application and be like, okay, it's not good enough to say, oh, this application is, I'm trying to protect something I invented. That's not what it's for. It's like you just said. Why isn't the patent examiner evaluating it on that basis?
Yeah, so the idea is that the those protections I said at the beginning, the new, non-obvious, that sort of stuff, those are supposed to be the implementation of it. That really gets to kind of the question of what's a good quality patent, and that's a discussion that is starting to be heard in Congress about what kinds of patents do we really want to be protecting? Do we want to be protecting all of these patents? Do we want a patent system that's just, you file an idea, if the idea happens to be new, then you get a patent? Or do we want somebody to actually have to show that, no, this was actually a really useful thing? And that, so I think that the more that people are saying, look, we're trying, what we really want is for people to be disclosing trade secrets. And the idea that patents are just kind of this God-given right, really doesn't make any sense. I think that's a message that people need to be hearing more. I can't see who's holding their hands up, so can we get the lights on? Yeah. Is there a microphone?
Hey, so I just had one question.
Yeah.
Where do you think, you mentioned earlier that these companies that are patent trolls, if you will, they don't actually produce anything? Whereas like Alice Corp, did they provide the software for somebody? And if not, where did the disconnect come where someone's available to create a program or create a product that they don't actually make and then try to get that as a patent? Is that a historical? Has that always happened? We just see it more? Or is that a disconnect that's pretty
so,
new?
the question of whether or not you have an obligation to actually make the thing that you have a patent on, Kind of the conventional wisdom is that no, there's never been any requirement. You can always have patents without that. There are some academics who are kind of challenging that position, saying no, actually there was some law back in the day that said you actually had to make something. Really, the problem is not so much that it's not so much per se the fact that the company's not making anything, as if you're not making anything, your incentives are really weird when it comes to asserting your patents. If you don't make anything, you're not worried about being sued back. So you're going to do like all sorts of crazy things in the litigation because you're not really worried about your reputation. So as a result, you'll make the cost skyrocket, and you'll bring in like 1,000 claims into your lawsuit, and you'll do all sorts of things. And that's really what happens when we start looking at the activity of these so-called patent trolls or non-practicing entities. The problem is not the fact that they don't make anything. The problem is the fact that because they don't make anything, and keep in mind, because of that fact, operating companies can do the same things, right? They end up engaging in all sorts of really silly, pointless litigation abuse that doesn't really help anybody. All right.
So maybe it's a made-up stat, but I heard somewhere 30% of new patents can be shown to basically already exist as patents.
Yeah.
And thus, that seems like the major bug in the system, both to take advantage and to sort of show the ridiculousness of the system. So, are people doing that? You basically just look through all the patents, refile all of them with different language, get, a third of them approved, and then countersue the company suing you with the same patent.
So, I would be surprised if anybody is actually engaged in looking through old patents and trying to refile them, because discovery is a very intrusive process, and if one document slips out that you did that, you would be in big trouble. That being said, there's no requirement to do a search before you file a patent application. So, if you just think that nobody's done this, you'll file a patent application on it, and you probably have no idea that somebody did it. And the real issue is, you may have two patent applications. I actually just saw this the other day. You may have two patent applications that really cover the same subject matter, but you saw all the words you can put in them, right? There's so much variation in language, it becomes really, really hard to figure out exactly what's going on and to make the assessment of, this is what they're really talking about once I figured out what all the complicated language is. And now I can actually do a real search. Part of this problem is that examiners have very, very little time to do their examination. Part of the problem is the hearing aid case problem, that you've got to find paper documentation of all the words, right? Even if the words are kind of meaningless or if they're just common sense. So those sorts of aspects make it really hard to get around this problem of you could have two patents basically on the same thing, but they look just different enough that it's really, really hard to make the argument that they're rejectable.
Do you know of a case where there were two companies sort of countersued each other with the same patent, or maybe there was a single company that got sued by two companies, for very similar patents?
So off the top of my head, I can't think of any, but what happens a lot, what used to happen a lot, the law changed so that this doesn't happen anymore, but you could have two people who file patent applications near the same time, and they would get into what's called an interference proceeding, in which they're trying to decide who came up with it first. But of course, that depends on the examiner realizing that these two things are the same thing. Usually the way that comes up is that one of the attorneys finds out that this other company filed a patent application on the same subject matter, and the attorney will basically tell the examiner, by the way, I think that there's an interference here. So, most of the time when that sort of very clear duplicativeness comes up, it's because one of the attorneys noticed it.
If you had the power to completely redesign the patent system from scratch, what would your ideal patent system look like?
Oh wow, that's a long question. There's a very clever quote. I did hear somebody say no patents. There's a very clever quote from I I forget who said this, that, if we had to decide from scratch whether to have a patent system, we would say no. But if we had to decide whether to have a patent system since we have a patent system, then we would say yes. Basically, we have it because we have it. I think the one thing that would really help, that I can explain very quickly, is to make the proceeding more two-sided. Right now, the way it works is that you have an application, you go in there, it's the examiner. The examiner is often just like a recent college graduate. And then, 30-year patent attorney veteran, facing off. It's not a particularly easy fight for the examiners. The examiners have a really hard time dealing with that sort of thing. And I mean, you and I would too. So, getting more public involvement in there would, I think, be a really big step. The Patent Office has already started doing this. There's a new program called, why can I not remember what it's called? Third-party submissions, in which, members of the public can send information to the examiners saying, hey, examiner, here's some prior art that you should read. And I think that more use of that program, kind of more formalization of it, and development of business models around that program, I think, are real potential opportunities for dealing with that. All right, next.
Hey, I'm from Freeside, Atlanta, but I work with medical research during my day job.
Yeah.
And I found that with the patent system, I know that is where a lot of startups and a lot of money comes from. But the problem is that with some of the ideas we have, we're not necessarily able to get things moving forward because that whole patenting monetary thing now becomes a roadblock, like where nobody wants to move forward or invest time or money unless they know that there's going to be a patent down the road. Do you have any advice for people who are trying to make hopefully cheaper medical solutions?
Yeah, so particularly when it comes to like the medical pharmaceutical device field, or medical device and pharmaceutical fields, a lot of the investors do kind of expect some sort of patent filings in there because they know that the regulatory path, you have to get FDA approval and all sorts of other things. They know that amount of time is going to cost a lot of potential lead time for the product, and so they think patents are a good way of dealing with that. This is one of the reasons that patents are actually useful, right? The fact that they provide that lead time. But it's difficult for a lot of smaller companies to achieve that funding. The Patent Office has developed programs to reduce the cost of doing these things. So they have these things called like provisional applications, and they have lower filing fees. Those are intended to try to help out some of the smaller companies where it's really useful. And I think that they're looking at other similar programs.
Thank you.
Yep.
You talked about that. Like, there's obviously companies that profit a lot over the bad situation of the patent system, and they try to defend the bugs in the system. But also there's also companies that are losing out. Like, I don't know how credible it is, like the big tech company, like anti-patent efforts, and they probably would like to, I don't know, they'd probably like the patent system to be better. How is there a way to like encourage these big companies that are on the losing side to take a more proactive effort rather than just like settle individually or something like that?
Yeah. So there are a lot of big companies that are very active, more so on the legislative front. I think that Newegg is famous for being the one company that won't. They never settle. They will fight every case, and so far they've been successful in every case. But litigation costs like $5 million per case, so it's really expensive. So a lot of them have turned to lobbying efforts and to talking to legislators as their preferred vehicle for trying to fix some of these problems. And in terms of that process, to a certain extent, you don't even have to go to the companies to get them to help out. You can do it yourself, right? You can call your senator and tell them, like, I want to support this. Just as a little background, there was a big patent reform bill that was moving a couple months ago that got killed off because of certain lobbying efforts from other lobbies. It'll probably come up again, so keep an eye out for that. And when that comes up, that would definitely be a good place to play a role. All right. All right, we got 1 minute, so I'm gonna try to do this fast.
I'm just wondering how often, like, the claims like the ones in that Alice Court patent get through. Is this sort of just the sort of like, well, there's some examiners who aren't quite up on their game and the language is really complicated, or is this kind of more the rule than the exception? If you have an idea about that.
So I have seen a lot of them. I can't give you any like quantitative. I can't give you numbers, but I will say that this is a thing that a lot of people will do. Just putting in a lot of language to try to make it look really impressive. And a lot of it is just mandated by the law, right? It's not this isn't like an examiner problem. Like this is because the law says you have to have this and you have to have this and you have to have this. And the more stuff you put in, the more you're going to look like you comply with the law. So a lot of times, that's really the driving factor behind, all of this kind of verbosity. All right, I think we're out of time, but I'm going to be downstairs, so I'm happy to talk with you more. But thanks for being a great audience.
Hello, Hope. Okay, before we get started with the second in our patent-themed part of the afternoon, a couple of quick announcements. If you go to any of our talks which are filled to capacity, keynotes and that sort of thing, especially things at Manning and Olson, please note that if you leave before the end of the talk, you won't be able to get back in, most likely, as somebody will have taken your place. So look out for that if you don't want to miss the end of a high-capacity talk. Don't leave before the end of it. A couple other things to touch on. If you want to hang up anything on the walls of the conference, that's cool. We're all for that. But get some blue tape from us. You can use the blue painter's tape to attach things to the walls. Nothing else. No Scotch tape, no masking tape, no audio tape, anything else. Just get the tape from us, and we'll give it to you. Beyond that, we're about ready to get going. So I'm happy to present Ed Ryan with Can You Patent Software.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for sticking around if you're here for the second part of the patent double feature. And if you are new, that's great, because I'm going to talk about some of the same stuff that Charles talked about, and it'll be fresh for you. So the basic thrust of this this talk is kind of to analyze what happened last month when the Supreme Court came down with the Alice versus CLS Bank decision. Because it unsettled the practice of patent law, and especially how software patents are approached. So the quick question, or the quick answer to the question of can you patent software is yeah, you still can. There are very vague rules currently about what you can and can't do when you're patenting software. And they got vaguer last month. But just to give you a quick idea of what I'm going to be talking about, I'm going to start off to talk about the basics of patent law, the foundations of it, where it comes from, and then we're going to talk specifically about software patents. I'm going to give you one specific example of a patent that we can all kick for a little while, and then we'll get into exactly what the legal requirements for a software patent are these days. So the basic idea behind software patents, these are the existence of them comes out directly from the Constitution, giving Congress the power to regulate intellectual property, not just for software, but for copyrights as well. Basically, the concept being in order to incentivize people into creating awesome new things, we give them certain rights over them. And the idea here, it comes out of sort of a philosophical background of if you put your labor into something, if you create something, you should have some kind of right to that thing. And that is very easy to see when it comes to like developing land or making a widget, but it's a little bit harder to see, and it's a little bit less of a natural fit when it comes to intellectual property. So the Congress has created a whole set of statutes that provide a framework for this. And as Charles discussed earlier, a patent is ultimately an exchange. The goal is if we're going to get the benefit of this creative effort, society wants the actual meat of that. They don't just want you to work in secret and create your fantastic widget and then never know how it was made themselves. So the trade that happens is the inventor gets this right, this monopoly right for a period of years, and in exchange, they explain how they did it. Currently, the patent term is 20 years from the date of filing, so it's a pretty long term if you keep up your maintenance fee payments, and you get an awful lot out of it. But the question arises of whether this actually promotes progress. And it's only until, say, the past couple of decades where that was even a question. It was kind of a given. Everybody just accepted that patents were amazing. To use a quote from I believe the Secretary of State from Japan in the 1920s, "What is it that makes the United States such a great nation? We investigated and we found it was patents, and we will have patents." So until very recently, it was common wisdom that patents were the be-all and end-all of how you drive, like from a policy perspective, how you drive innovation in a country. But there's a very legitimate point, which is that people would still make stuff even if they didn't have patents. There are a variety of other motivations beyond, you know, the pure profit interest. And even then, invention has pecuniary rewards, even if you don't have an exclusive monopoly to it. The open source movement and hackers or makers are a great example because they're motivated by something other than the almighty dollar. They're in it for passion, for curiosity, or whatever. But there are fields in which it's not so easy to get in, right? Part of the charm of our culture is that it's very accessible. Anybody can pick up a book and learn how to program. Anybody can pick up a $30 soldering iron and learn how to make you know, something out of electronics. When you get into more abstract things and harder to develop things, pharmaceuticals are a great example, it's harder to make the case that people would put as much effort into innovation and developing new technologies in these fields because they are very hard to produce and very easy to copy. You know, once you've got this, and you know, you have to let people know what chemical they're putting in their bodies. Once you've got that chemical, other people can step in and make it, even though it may have cost you tens of millions of dollars to get to the point to figure out, okay, this is the chemical that cures headaches or whatever. So it's harder to accept that people would, out of a sense of passion, produce new pharmaceuticals. But you know, every single field has its own set point. And so specifically when we talk about software patents, we have to look a little bit harder because we all know for a fact that software develops at a very rapid pace even outside the context of patents. People will do everything they can to get away from patents in the world of software. So what I have personally found is that the biggest effect that patents seem to have is they reduce transaction costs. Transaction costs being a term from economics, which means once you've got, what does it cost in order to do business, right? I'm a patent attorney. I talk to inventors. I talk to people who are, you know, in it for the first time. They've got this great idea and they don't want to talk to anyone about it. And when you've got a great idea and you want to make it and you want to see something happen, not talking to anyone about it is the worst possible thing you can do to actually make it happen. But they don't want to talk about it because they're afraid of somebody taking it. And you know, writ large, that affects absolutely every single part of our economy. When people are no longer willing to talk about their things and come out and openly develop them, you end up with a lot of effort gets wasted on secrecy, and there's a large opportunity cost in that you don't get the feedback that you might need in order to complete your development. So the question then becomes, what can we patent? And this is set out in the statute as being whoever invents or discovers any new or useful process, machine, manufacture, or composition of matter. And software is usually claimed as either a process or as a machine that's sort of designed to accomplish something. So if it's not one of these, four things? If it's not one of these four things, it's right out. But software, from the cleverness of the draftsman, they write it in terms of something that looks right. However, there are exceptions to those four statutory categories of patentable subject matter. And the courts, and starting in 1854, the courts have recognized certain categories of exception. You have laws of nature, natural phenomena, and abstract ideas. So laws of nature comes out of things like you can't patent the propagation of electromagnetic waves, right? You can't patent radio, or at least you can't patent the concept of radio, the concept of radio waves propagating through space. That said, if you had a device that in a specific way manipulated electrons to create radio waves propagating through space, and you patent that device, you're not patenting that law of nature, you're patenting a specific object. Natural phenomenon, kind of a similar thing. You can also, for example, you can't patent a cat, right? Cats have been around a long time. Nature made cats. If you genetically engineer your own awesome super cat, you might be able to get a patent on that. But when we talk about software patents, the key is abstract ideas. Software patents often get couched as abstract ideas when the courts talk about them, because software isn't really anything, right? You can't put your hands in some software. You can't hit somebody with software, right? So ultimately, we have to find some way of phrasing software. So if we want to avoid this, it has to not seem like an abstract idea. Now keep in mind, that said, processes are patentable. So the question now is, how do we tell which one's which? And it's worth asking why software is different. Because of all, when you talk about an invention, you're talking about somebody who's expending effort and creativity and trying to make something new and awesome happen. Okay? So why should it be so different when you're talking about I made this radio versus I made the software for the radio? My personal belief as to why software is such a big deal for us, and why software patents are such a big deal for us, is because software is kind of unique in that, well, it's not. Let me take a step back. It's not unique, but software is a new field. The past 4 decades, questions of software have really been popping up in the legal world. And because it changes so rapidly, you end up with situations where things that you didn't really expect to have an application now suddenly do. And so you can patent something for what you intended, and then a little bit later find that it's useful for something completely different that you had no conception of when you made it. In addition, because software as an industry is so new, when you patent the basic building blocks of an industry, you essentially own that industry. And you can't, other people have a lot of difficulty getting in after that point. And on a more direct, scale, it kind of offends core beliefs in our community. Open source is all about sharing. Hacking in secret is no fun. We like to talk about what we do. We like to share what we do, and we like it when other people do awesome new things with what we've done. And so the concept of patenting something on that scale, it really sours the whole mix. I should note at this point that we are talking in addition about, when we talk about software patents, we ultimately talk about a lot of different things all at once. We talk about novelty, we talk about obviousness, and we talk about the bare concept of software patents. And different people have different problems with this at each different step of the way. Most of the time when you hear about software patents, people are really talking about obviousness, because that's what really gets to us. When we look at something and say, I could have done that. That's nothing interesting or new. That's just, a kind of workmanlike addition of one thing to another thing. There's nothing there. But what I'm talking about here is on a very basic level. Is software itself patentable? So software patents and the attempts to patent them, or software and the attempts to patent them, have been around for a very long time at this point. In my scale, they've been along longer than I have. The Supreme Court found in 1972 that numerical algorithms and mathematical formulae are unpatentable abstract ideas. And that sort of sets the tone, right? They came right out and said, algorithms are abstract ideas. So now we have to find something about software, because if you just take it like that, well, kind of every piece of software boils down to algorithms. So in 1982, the Supreme Court took it in the other direction, which is that somebody patented, this is the case Diamond versus Deere, somebody patented a process for curing rubber, which involved a computer that calculated the exact right temperature and time at which you pull that rubber out, at which point it's no longer goo, now it's a rubber doodad. And because that software was implemented on a computer, and it was implemented in this useful technological process, that software was patentable. So I want to emphasize, though, the point that eligibility, that what I'm talking about here, abstract ideas, whether those are patentable, whether software is patentable, is different from the question of novelty. Because there are many, many bad patents out there for a variety of different reasons. And just because something is obvious doesn't mean it's not eligible in the statutory sense, right? So here's an example. This is a patent for a doubly linked list. It was filed, I believe, in 2004. It issued in 2006. So I would like to get a little bit of feedback here. Were doubly linked lists invented in 2004? Well, somebody here up front invented them in 2003, and he should sue. Okay, I'm waiting. Okay. All right, great. So I'm just going to give you an idea of what this patent talks about. Because can you read it on there? Probably not. No. A computerized list that may be traversed in at least two sequences comprising a plurality of items that are contained in a computerized list. That's 1, 2, and 3 there. And then a primary pointer and an auxiliary pointer for each of the items. And then there's a bunch of verbiage. Basically, the primary pointer takes you on a first sequence through the list. The auxiliary pointer takes you through a second sequence of the list. And the idea, the way it's phrased, is it's very general. So you can go basically any path through this collection of items, including just backwards. And so if you have a textbook from before 2004 that shows linked lists, you will see a doubly linked list that reads on this patent. So I think we've determined now whether this is new and non-obvious. I think we all know pretty clearly that it was done before, and so it's a bad patent. We can say that with some confidence. The question of the day, though, is it eligible subject matter for a patent? And I want to get your opinion on that. Based on your layman's knowledge of what a software patent is this eligible subject matter for a patent? The primary pointer is not defined. It's probably defined in the spec. Yeah, I expect so. I don't know if somebody once tried to invent if statements. I think probably we have them. It's no problem, but if we could keep most of the questions towards the end, that would be great. So we agree, it's not new, and the question is it eligible? And so we have to look, does software fall into one of those exceptions? Because we can characterize software